Hi, I'm Chris with Entry Thingy. This is Art of the Call, where we're asking artists, curators, and directors to talk about the call for entry process. In this video, it's Sally Hedman with Lake Oswego Festival of the Arts.
It's moving into its 50th year, so this is our 50th year celebration. And the goal of it is to educate the public about art and of the region. And so we do it in conjunction with the city. And the two gals who started it 50 years ago are still involved. They're advisors, and they're quite active. They're in their 80s. So there are quite a few events that are part of the art show, part of the festival. There's the craft fair, which is now going to be called Art in the Park. In honor of our 50th, we decided to move into the next century. And then there's an open show up here at the Lakewood Center, and there's the Artist's Vision, which is a primarily 2D show, and the Chronicle, which documents what's going on in life in Lake Oswego, and there's a special exhibit. So the craft fair is in George Rogers Park, which is just 2 blocks down this way, and it's a baseball field, and so we just take it over, and there's music, performing arts, food, and the craft fair. And this year we're also trying to work more on the process. One of the things that we introduced last year was to have the artists put up their artist statement in their booths, which some did, some didn't. But we found that promotes sales, and that's what we're all about, is both education, and we want the artists and the patrons to, have transactions with one another. And so we often ask the artists to do demos, but we find that they're too busy during the process, during the festival itself. So we're looking at other guilds and groups of artists to come in and be a little bit separate from the show itself, but do demos, so that, because I think a lot of patrons appreciate knowing how the art is put together, and I think they just appreciate the value and the hard work that goes into putting art together. I've talked to artists, and they get really excited about showing people how they do their work, and some of them are very adept at doing that. And so it's kind of a trial balloon, see how it works. And a lot of the more seasoned artists think, oh, we don't do that. But I think a lot of the newer artists thought, oh, this is what we're supposed to do, so this is what we're going to do. And they've done it. And it gives them an opportunity to engage with the patrons. It goes both ways. I mean, I think that a lot of artists are a little bit shy about engaging the customers that are potential customers that come into their booths. So it's just a good conversation starter. Well, we just went through a big kind of rehash of that this year, because we, how do we decide? It's just, it's pretty standard. I mean, I look at what other art shows are doing and see what they put up, and we don't use all of theirs, but this year I combined all of painting into one category. We took the quote-unquote other category out because people were just not knowing where to put their stuff, and so they put it into other, and this year they're going to have to figure it out. And they can always call us and say, what happened to other? Where do I go? And then we'll discuss it, and so that will help our end, comparing when we do the jury to know where things belong. For instance, there's a lot of different types of woodworking, and some of the woodworking goes into 3D art, and some of it goes into actual woodworking, where they're carving or turning their work. Well, since I've been here, I've just started with what we had to begin with, and then I've looked at a lot of other shows, and I get their perspectives. And I've modified it for this year, for instance, as I changed all of the, we went from 16 categories down to 13 categories. And we've always had just lists of what the categories are. And this year I made it, I described each one. And that will help people know where they belong. And so we put in a little bit of promotion about the festival itself, about Lake Oswego, about the community, about who the people are who come, and we describe what the requirements are for the jurying process. And then we have a section called Rules of Participation, so that when they get the contract, which they typically don't get until May or April, no, it's sooner than that. When they get the copy of the contract, it doesn't come as a surprise to them what's in there. So we list all the rules of participation. And we review that every year. Depends on, our experience and the artist's experience, what we want to emphasize and make sure that they understand. It's important to have it there. It's critical to have a website there, and it has a little bit of everything for everybody. So we have an artist section, and so when they approach it, they know which event in the festival that they're going to be applying to. And that also helps them understand that they're not the only event in the show, because there's such a geographic difference between what goes on in the Lakewood Center and what goes on in the park. So we want them to know what goes on and kind of get people to move between the two venues. And so we want the artists to know, for instance, this year we're keeping up the gallery from last year, which we haven't done in the past, so that they know the caliber, that applying artists know the caliber of the work that was in the prior year. And we want them, just to have a feel that, how many people come and how crowded it is, and what the activities are, and that it's always sunny in Lake Oswego. And so the website actually mirrors the prospectus. There's some additional information. There are pictures, there are the links. Again, we look at what the going rate is with other shows. And last year, to encourage people to come to pay on time, we set up an early bird fee, so that, and then it got a little bit more expensive. It's like a few percentage points higher if they were after that deadline. And I think our booth fee is comparable to what others are. It might be a little bit lower, but we're surrounded by a couple of much bigger shows, and not that they've been around longer, but they attract a broader group of artists. We're in a small bedroom community, and these other shows are in cities, so they just automatically attract more people, and their fees are higher. Most of the shows in our area are not commission shows. Ours is not a commission show either. So I think with commission shows, the fee is a lot lower. We probably have about 500 volunteers, and we have a committee. The steering committee consists of 50 plus people, and it's getting bigger. And most of the people on the steering committee are volunteers. And then we have a volunteer coordinator who reaches out to companies, communities, other volunteer agencies to get more people. And then we have volunteers for booth sitting, hospitality, information, general, helping set up kind of people. And so that's how we get volunteers. And since, in the last 3 years since I've been doing this, the booth sitting element has been wonderful. I mean, it's really built up to something that works well, and we've been fine-tuning the process of what they can and can't do. Like in the early days, we had the volunteers accepting money, but we're no longer doing that because it's a liability that we don't want to take on, and so we don't. We probably have about 50 or 60 booth sitters, and that's our primary need, and that's gotten very, very well organized. Well, we now have somebody who is the coordinator of bringing the volunteers in, and so we each of us who needs them, we tell her. And then for booth sitting, we have a booth sitting coordinator, and she is the person who schedules them, greets them, gives them a little training, sends them off to do their job, and checks them back in after they're done. It requires having the right person in there to do it, to be gracious and helpful and informative. The festival's at the end of June. In July, we do debriefing and decide what's important and what's not important, or at least discuss what kinds of changes we're going to do for next year. Then in this year, we did a little bit of prospecting to kind of try to build up the number of artists that we reach each year and try to get more people applying so that we have a bigger pool to fish from when we're selecting artists. So we'll see how that works, but that's been a pretty big effort this year. It pretty much happens as it happens. I mean, we use Entry Thingy, and the applications come in, we look at them, and in February we have our formal jury of everything that we've received, and as they're coming in, we're looking at them, but there's not really much to be done at that point. And then we just set up a jury, and they pick and choose what they like, and they discuss it a little bit. I want to kind of build that discussion aspect up more. And then we send out the acceptance wait list and not accepted. Before we started using Entry Thingy, we were in a room, we had everything up on the screen and in a PowerPoint. And now we use Entry Thingy, and the images look much better on the computer than they do as they're projected. And so we're in a classroom with 3 or 4 computers. They're each looking at the images, each of the 3. We usually have 3 jurors, and they vote on the different categories of quality for the image, and then they move on to the next category. But before they move on to the next category, in the way we used to do it, there was a lot more conversation between the jurors. But now that they're, looking at a computer, there's not as much conversation. So we have to generate, stop, let's talk about this. What did you like? What did you not like? And try to get them to discuss it a little more. That way we can learn and improve the quality of the work that we have in the show. Well, I talked to a variety of people here on the steering committee and see if they have any recommendations. I try to get a cross-section of gallery owners, we've had somebody from the Portland Art Museum. We look at academics, the Oregon College of Art and Craft, and so we want 3 people who have a broad overview of all of the 13 categories. The artists who are award winners are eligible to be on the jury because they are automatically accepted for the following year. There's a risk no matter how you look at it, because I could have a potter who won last year and she wants her best friend over here to get in, and so there's a little bias coming from by having artists kind of get their give their friends higher points. And jurors can do that too. we try to make it a blind jury, but a lot of, it's a small, the artist community is not huge, and so they recognize a lot of people, so they know their work and who they are and so forth. So it can't be, 100% pure blind jurying. And some artists will make a mistake and take their booth shot and have their name on the front of it, and you can ask them not to do that, but they might do it anyway. From a show director position, I think some of it could depend on how the artist interacts with the customer. I mean, some customers don't want to be approached, they just want to look, and that's fine, and maybe they'll come back later. But if an artist is sitting in her little lawn chair eating lunch and not paying attention to what's going on, I don't think she's going to do as well as somebody who's kind of looking alive and looking around and saying, I'm happy to answer questions. So that's, there's so many different factors. I'd be hard pressed to say which is the key element. And I have a survey that I give to the artists, and if I can, it's not foolproof by any means, but it gives me a clue about how much they're making. And hopefully they're being reasonably honest when they're answering it. So last year, in spite of the rain, they reported that they did better than the prior year. So I was really surprised and happy about that, because the other shows up here were not doing as well. So what I love to see is patrons walking around with heavy bags. And a successful show, I look at what the artists say back to me at the end of the show or during the show, and as I say, I do this survey, and they answer questions like, would you recommend this show to your artist friends? Would you come back next year? So I get responses that way. It's not scientific, but it gives me a sense of what's going on. Sales for the artists, that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for, but we're also here for education, and that's totally not something we can say, oh, we educated so many people this weekend by, having them come through. And that is our primary goal.